Hello, welcome to today's show. I'm Jacqueline Stockwell, CEO and founder at Leadership Through Data. I inspire and motivate information leaders across the world. Hello, and welcome to today's show. I'm joined by Tania, who's the founder of Data Privacy Simplified and a fellow of the IRMS with a MSc and a background in the 100,000 genome programs. She's a leading expert in navigating complex data landscapes. Now, Tania works across health, education, and research to unstick data sharing challenges. She acts as a DPO and a consultant, translating the dense language legal requirements into practical, ethical solutions that allow organizations to innovate without compromising safety. Now, she's on a mission to make privacy an enabler rather than a blocker. Her goal is to build public trust through transparency, ensuring that even the most advanced data research always puts the individual and the patient first. So welcome to today to the show.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I'm really humbled and proud that you invited me. And yes, absolutely. It's very important to have the public trust in whatever we do with the data.
Agreed. So you've spent years in the depth of the National Health Service. What was the light bulb moment that made you realise the industry needed data privacy simplified rather than just the more sort of legal jargon?
That is from the years and years of being in health, some stunts in commercial as well, but that people need to really understand that when they're doing great jobs, and they're doing great jobs in their health service, that the data that they use belongs to someone. And whilst they know that, sometimes in the day-to-day, emergency, all of that might get forgotten. And it's like, well, it's just an email address. It's just this, without actually thinking in the ever-evolving landscape that we have. We need the data, but for receiving the data, we need the trust of the public who shares the data with us. And as you said, I'm absolutely for us being enablers. I do not like when people see us as barriers. We are not barriers, neither is the Data Protection Act. We need to translate what it means to be transparent to the public and using the data safe. And that does go hand in hand, but I'm not going to lie, it comes with its challenges.
So you're a fellow of the IRMS and the CEO. How has your background in information management shaped your approach to leadership compared to a traditional legal first DPO?
So, for example, when we worked in the NHS, as you know, data controllership, data processorship, research, innovation, all of these terminologies, people heard the terms, not necessarily understanding exactly what it meant. And whilst there's lots of guidance out there from the ICO, it doesn't always apply in that way. And you need to take an approach where, does it work for the patients? What does it mean? Do you work together with your healthcare guardians, with the information risk management, with the records management? All of that forms a picture. It's not just data protection and all, or common law of confidentiality and all. It's very complex. So, we have the section 251. I don't want to go into too much terms because for a lot of people who watch this, it might mean nothing. So it's basically making sure you look at what is objective, what are we trying to do, and how can we get there, not how we can prevent that. And I feel sometimes when it comes to legal, in the word of legal, it's about protecting businesses and their ambitions, forgetting that actually we are here to ensure that data protection is transparent and then people on the ground understand that. That's why privacy policies also should not be too legal. Yes, we have to do it by law, but for me, this is not why we're doing it. We're doing it so people understand we would like your data for innovation research, for population health management. Yes, you can opt out if you like. These are the consequences. And this is one of the examples I wanted to talk about because, for example, we have the population health management, which is done to ensure that we use data to give the population what they need based on the data. But for us to get the data, we need a legal basis. But obviously some patients don't want that. And that's why we have the national opt-out. However, with that, then we have some medical professionals saying, well, it's not fair because if we don't have the data, the ones that opted out are not going to get the benefits. Well, that's the balance, isn't it? To give patients choices to use the data. And I feel we're not preventing any of that. It is necessary to give people choices. And if they choose to opt out, we need to uphold that, even if it means they might not have the same outcome. But it's not different that someone not agreeing to treatment. We have to give them choices.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that data protection is preventing it. That's giving choices.
Agreed. And I just want to kind of probe in there. You talked about Section 251. So
Yes.
I know that because I came from the NHS, but people who are not NHS that are listening, can you just explain that for me?
Yes, absolutely. Well, in health and care and also other environments, Data protection obviously has legal bases for using data. In the NHS, we talk about common law of confidentiality, how that's applied, and how we make sure we meet both. And sometimes, you might have to use data in health where you can't, it's not for direct care, it's for other things. And then we go out and apply to the confidentiality advisory group, which has put in place by the Secretary of State to look into those cases. Why should we use it without direct care, without consent, without any of the other legal basis? And that's when it gets presented. There's trusts or even commercials that can apply to say, right, we want to carry out this research, or we want to do risk stratification in health, identifying who could benefit, who's at risk, how can we prevent that? Now in UK GDPR, we have, 9H, which says preventative medicine, but we still have to look at the other laws that are in place to make sure we don't override. And that's where we then do the application. It's complex, but it's not unsurmountable. And it's there to protect the trust of the public. And obviously, it's far more complex than I can put in 1 minute. I hope it helped a little bit.
Yeah, that was sensational. All is good. So your tagline is making privacy an enabler, not a blocker. Now, for the entrepreneurs, and I call them entrepreneurs, so they're information leaders that work within inside an organization that have the same creative ideas as an entrepreneur. The only difference is an entrepreneur takes the financial risk. So for the entrepreneurs listening, how can we change our mindset to see compliance a competitive advantage rather than checkbox?
This is, I love that question, because, I've grown I started by myself, and then now we're like a team of 15 and growing. And it's really difficult to part with, your vision when you employ people or you work with other people, with clients who have a different data protection mindset. They go from, this is what the law says, this is what we need to do because the law says it, the data security protection toolkit and so on. This is not what I'm about. I'm like, right, yes, we have a guidance about who's a data controller, who's a data processor. What I don't want is stop vital vaccination programs because there's 10 data protection officers in the system fighting who's what. It's not appropriate. It's about, okay, how does the data come in? What does the patient expect? How can we create a model that works for all? Whether it's joint data controllership or data processor to data controller, independent data controllers, does it, and I'm going to say something very controversial and someone is going to attack me here. Does that matter when you've got a model that actually works for the patients, the medical professionals, and the data protection law? Does that really matter who is what, as long as it is clear and it is based on the foundation of the law, but not necessarily, right, this person actually is directing it? Because then we're going to the Secretary of State is a data controller. But it's not, is it? We have NHS England sometimes being a data controller. We have the GPs being a data controller. So please, let's work with what's important. Let's get these vital programs out legally, but more importantly, transparently and workable. Because there's no point saying this is the data controller, and then you ask him, okay, are you going to deal with any complaints, data breaches, medical, legal? No, that's not us. Okay, let's sit down and work it out rather than insisting on legalities that can have different interpretation. And the ICO agrees with some of that. When I worked in NHS England, the ICO agreed that we are not the data controller of some of the data, and then the GPs are the data controller. So there is ways we need to unstuck this thinking of this is what the law says. Is that what the law means? And can we work within it? That's more where I come in. And that's what I'm trying to teach my staff, but also when I work with as an extended DPO team, where clients have that DPO expertise, but I'm coming in with my information governance, with my think outside the box.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so let's talk about health and healthcare research.
Yes.
So you've been instrumental in implementing shared care records across regions. So when you walk into a room where data sharing is stuck, what is the most common barrier you have to break down?
Everyone's trying to protect their organization. They have different risk tolerances, and they will be like, well, I need to pass this by my CIRA, I need to do this. And almost I feel like, are you advising your CIRA that this is too risky? You're going to end up with a headache and a problem, which I will get. I get that they feel like that, because when it comes to complaints, they're going to be stuck with it. But what we need to work with in an integrated care system or integrated board environment and regional is with different risk tolerances and different risks. That should not be a barrier. We should sit down, be transparent and say, right, we're going to work on this together. We need to bring the leaders on board, that they're not letting us hanging when there's a problem. This is a no-blame culture that we work in the NHS, and that should extend to collaboration. Because if we don't share records, then we can't provide the best care available. But it has to be, yes, we can trust this organization. And we have put those measures in place. It's not risk-free, Jackie. Anyone who says it's risk-free, it's about good, healthy risk management approach.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, risk, because as you said, everybody's risk tolerance level is completely different.
Yes.
Some are higher, some are lower, and I do think that can be the barrier to get things done, as you just described. But I also think it's about us as data protection officers, privacy officers, records managers, having an understanding of who those people that have a higher risk tolerance and providing them with enough information. And I'm going to talk kind of about colour profiling here, the DIS framework and the Surrounded by Idiots book, which I absolutely love, which is having an understanding that and it's colour code. I don't even know much about it, but blues are very sort of risk tolerant, very data led, analytical. Whereas somebody's yellow would be an entrepreneurial, enthusiastic, and then a red would exactly kind of the same, and then a green is a people pleaser. But it's having that understanding of who those people, the higher risk tolerant levels, and giving them the facts and figures so you can encourage them more to make those decisions in advance of what you're describing, those sharing. So that's amazing. So thank you for that. So working with 100,000 geonorms programs involves incredibly sensitive data. How do you balance the aggressive pace of medical innovation with the absolute necessity of putting the data subject first?
Sitting down with the medicals, with the policymaker, with high level in the politics side of things, sitting down and really get an agreement of the objectives and assuring them that you're not the barrier as a privacy lead, but you want to make sure that the public does not end up stop trusting, and then you won't get the data. Because if you want the data, you need the public's trust. And we've seen it many, many times. That's going to be your real blocker. But if you privacy by design it in a way that it's transparent, you have your consent rights, you have the information leaflets right, be moral in the ethics. One of the first things we discuss is it really appropriate? Someone just coming in, you told them your entire family has this gene, and then you ask them about consent for research. Not the right time. There's ways of doing this appropriately where people have the space and want to contribute. Who does not want to contribute to change, the outcome of their family members that yet to be born? These are life-making decisions when you have those genes, and they want to support, but there's the right time and the right way, and transparent. Don't hide behind clauses. Don't say, well, the privacy policy was there. That is not appropriate. I think privacy policy is important, but with this, it's important that they really understand at the right time how they can make a difference with the research. Because in that moment, when you're being told you have this life-changing gene, your whole family is affected, you kind of want to think about your family first. Give them that grace before you extend to think about the rest of the public. And, when you sit down, all of these people want the same things. We just have to really come to this. What I hate is email ping pong. Don't do that. Sit down, because people read an email differently than your intention.
Yeah. Communication is key. So if you're using the privacy policy, that's your blocker there already.
Yeah.
So that's just not helpful in terms of any conversations that you're having. And I think most of our jobs anyway are relationship building.
Yes.
I think, if you look at the jobs, it should be 60% relationship building and then 40% actually doing the stuff on the relationships that you've already built. Fantastic. So in the context of data access request services, so how do you build public confidence when the average person is often skeptical about how the health data is being used for secondary purposes?
That comes to making sure that the entire system actually understands what we're doing, and that's where a lot of myths comes in. I don't think everyone understands the national and the local opt-out. They don't understand how it works. So then if they can't explain it to the public is not going to understand it, and they're not going to trust it, because sometimes they confuse things. So public thinks, I'm here an individual, if I don't want my data not to be used, it's not going to be used. That's actually not correct. It depends for what. And I think that's where it starts, at the moment where data is collected. And of course, a GP can't explain the whole purposes, but there are means to make sure the public is aware, but also the consequences of not using that. So yes, we have national opt-out mechanism, but the data will still be used for commission purposes. The data will still be used for direct care. And when some people complain, data subject complainant says, I haven't given consent to do this and this. It's about the public understanding. We are not using consent for some of these things. And that's where it goes wrong, because someone in the health service, whether it's a nurse or someone, might use the word consent. And that's where then data subjects get confused. Even medical professionals get confused. Even data protection officer sometimes get confused when it's consent for treatment or consent for research, consent for data processing. Because in research, we say all of these things like you give your consent for research. But if we have your data, we cannot delete it. And I think that bit is missing, where someone puts in a deletion request and you go, I can't delete it because I have other regulatory purposes. They think, but you ask for my consent. And it's that you yourself, and it's not just IG people and data protection officer, everyone needs to understand that, because you're the ones giving them the assurances when they sit in front of you. You want the data for research or for population health management or whatever you want it for. If your team, your BI team, your front-facing team doesn't understand it, that's a problem, because how is the data subject going to understand that?
Yeah, agreed. So I'm going to talk about AI now.
Uh,
So we're in an era of rapid AI adoption. So what are the privacy preserving technologies that you get most excited for the future of research?
First of all, the understanding of AI, because we had BI and algorithms a long time before what people perceive as AI. But that obviously was more controlled. We could control it. So we had, where people, very clever people, could manipulate rows and rows of millions of data to get what they wanted out. Right. But there was more control. There wasn't there, so it wouldn't get out. Now with AI, where we have to bring software in, where it sits on the cloud, that's where we need to make sure we have the right balance of, we need AI in medical research, in predictive, ways of predicting disease and all of that. That's amazing. But again, if we can't give the assurances to the public, we have a problem. I do get excited about the fact that when we have AI, we can actually identify diseases much quicker. On the other hand, I still want a very good professional scientific person to look at the results. Does that make sense? I hope I don't contradict myself. I love AI for a lot of reasons, but it has to have a government framework. And again, for the clinicians out there, clinical safety is as important as AI information security assurances. I think they mix it up. They're saying, oh, here's the DPAA, do it. And I've seen that. They come to me, here's the DPAA. And I'm like, okay, I can look at the legal basis. And I meet with the, we have AI specialists, we meet with the supply and all of that. And it's great. Where's your clinical safety aspect? Where is it? That's my question. So everyone out there, look at my accent. And I know when we do like transcription, half of the time what I say is not what I say. So how is that done in a clinical environment? When I speak to a GP, I get why they want AI. What if what I say is not what I say? And then we have the issue of me as a data subject being like, can you correct that? Just leaving that there, because there's a huge debate how we do that. So it's about that. Think about the ethical and morality of using these tools for the right reasons, because we don't have the funding and we want to treat as many people as we can, but are we suffering quantity over quality?
Yeah.
But I am excited in medical research.
You look excited because you've sat up and you've moved your body language, and we've got a bit more
I'm getting all Italian passionate. Yes, I know. I do. AI is exciting, but safe. Like everything else. It's not, safe, transparent, and balanced risk management approach. I think it comes down to risk management and people, as you said, understanding, because when I do my CSIRO training and all of this, the CSIROs can't know it all, like the DPO can't know it all. But having the people around you in their areas of skill set and expertise advising you, and you making the best risk-based decision in the balance of patient comes first, patient's best interest. That's where your Connecticut Guardian and the medicals come in.
So let's talk about ethics. So you talk a lot about meaningful data use.
Yes.
In an age of big data, how do we define what is meaningful versus what is just possible?
With the meaningful, I will have to bring my medical professions in it, my Connecticut Guardians, because I am not, I can look at a data set and I can say, yeah, looks great. And, I had to learn a lot about data when I worked in the DAS team, the data access team. That was amazing because, we were sitting there and deciding what was ethical. And obviously we had a whole process to go through with the advisory group, with amazing people as well. But it was hard because huge data, some of the data sets were very academic. And I'm not a medical professional. I could read it and it would make sense to me. But how am I going to sit there and think about data minimization? That's where you have to have honest conversations with medical professionals. Says, look, I have my expertise, you have yours. You have to translate yours to me, and I translate mine to yours. And then we find that ethical balance. What would you as a person want to happen? And again, there's a very, I might be very open with my data and I don't have a problem. But think about the people who have domestic abuse or whatever they have in their life going. They might very much be like, anything about me out and about can affect me and my family negatively. So we need to think about this. We can't just look at the data, can we use it anonymous? Can we use it pseudonymous? How can we reduce the risk of it? But big data is important, but we can't forget those little data sets little postcodes, like, when they say, oh, it's just postcode. Yeah, but it's maybe just one house. So it's this combined skill set of someone in the medical sphere to explain to you what they want, someone in BI to explain the impact test, because, we are asked of this. How much data is saved? Okay, can I please speak to my BI colleague? Because I'm not a BI person. So yes, we have the rule in the NHS, but we really need to understand what it means and not just be like five things. Yes, that's the general rule if you small data set aggregated and so on. But when you say these things, do you really know what it means? And if not, please find someone who knows, because it's just what we take as a quick fix. Yes, that's what the NHS said. Aggregated, 5 number suppression, all of that. Please make sure you understand what it means. Don't just take it because someone has said it. And that's your way forward. Everyone has responsibility. We always say this. IG is everyone's responsibility. Do we know what that means?
So let's just talk about you as a person. So you're a mum.
Yes.
And mum brings lots of empathy and balance to our work. So how does the mum perspective influence the way you approach data ethics?
That comes from a lot of personal experiences with the services, but also outside of services. And when your children are younger, you always try the best that you can. You go to the doctors, you tell them everything. What you forget and you learn, I guess as a data protection officer, but also as a mum, is these children grow up. They're going to see their records and what you've said about them. And even if it comes from a way of love, of being open with services, I think the services forget that records can cause huge drama in families. And that understanding to having parents who are desperate, seeking, in these days, there's a lot of things about mental health, a lot of more ADHD, autism spectrum, all of these things. These are just terminologies. Parents are desperate to seek help. But what they might forget is that that's all going to be in the records. And I think it's that transparency and ethical approach again, making sure that the professional understands what that could cause. Now, all these professionals mean no harm, right? That's what they want in the best interest of the patients. But these children will have rights when they grow up. And I think it's educating the children, educating the parents, educating everyone in schools, about AI in the safe use. Facebook, well, it's not Facebook anymore. I'm so old. I think they use other things, but safe use. When you think about what's happening in Australia, they're banning social media, that, they're saying all of the impact. We were not oblivious to that. We were not idiots. Sorry if I used that word, but we knew that social media is not always a good impact. But it's about that balance and not the blame on schools and politicians, the responsibility as parents, but also helping parents to understand. And that needs to happen a lot more in education settings. We all have responsibility as parents and in the social impact.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. That was super, super duper. How can listeners reach out to you if they want to connect with you after the show?
Obviously, I have we have a website at Privacy Simplified. My email address is obviously tania@dataprivacysimplified.co.uk. I spared you the surname, so you don't have to put that in. We also have inquiries, DPO. They can reach out to me. I'm also a committee member of the East of England IG Forum. So anyone in the healthcare sector, you're welcome to join the East of England IG Forum. I know it says East of England, but we welcome anyone because it's about sharing. It's about educating. It's about, in a world that we live in, to be kind, to be human, and to support one each other. And we just have to be here as mums, as non-mums, as everything that you can do will have an impact. And it's the art of systems thinking. What you do when you're kind can have a huge impact, even if you never see it. But what you do when you're unkind can also have huge impact.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for being bold. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for listening to the Journals of the Information Entrepreneur with me, Jacqueline Stockwell. I hope you found this episode inspiring and helpful and have some takeaway tips that can be useful to you. If you liked this episode, please like, review and share it with your friends. Your support helps us reach more information leaders to stay inspired and listen to great content. Want to test out your strengths and weaknesses and measure it against our Empower framework? Please complete the scorecard. It's a great way to improve and evaluate your skills. You can find the scorecard at the end of the description of this podcast. Stay tuned for a new podcast every Thursday, and remember to be bold, be brave and be beautiful.